Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the SPA Resources Committee. As usual, it is being live streamed, so welcome to everybody who is joining us from afar. If I drop off the call for any reason, Caroline Stewart will take over as chairing the meeting until I'm reconnected. And I'd like to extend a welcome to colleagues from Scottish Government and HMICS. Before we actually go into the business of the meeting, I would like to record the committee's thanks to Katrina Stewart, who has stepped down as a member of the committee, and I'm sure we would all like to put on record our thanks for her contribution. Now, in terms of apologies, we have apologies from Tom Halpin and Alistair Hay. And because of that, and because of the items on the agenda today, I've invited Fiona McQueen and Katerina Casper to attend. As people probably know, under Section 58 of our standing orders, substitute members of the committee of the authority can participate with all the powers of being a member of the committee. And I think, given the nature of what we're going to discuss, it's actually helpful to have additional members here. Fiona will be joining us for the full meeting, and Katerina will join us until we've completed the budget discussions for next year. So, moving on to item 1.3.
No, well, it just looks nicer.
Chair, not sure what happened there, but I've muted everybody in the call, so if you could unmute yourself and
yes,
carry on, thank you.
I just spotted that. There was some interference. I don't know exactly what was happening, but hopefully we're okay now.
We are.
Right, thank you. I was just about to turn to item 1.3, declaration of interests and connections. Has any member got declare any interest or connections? Thank you. And as usual, on item 1.4, we have to take a decision on taking business in private, which in this case is items 4 onwards. And I would ask members to agree taking these items in private. Thank you. So, moving on to section 2, the minutes and the actions. We've got on 2.1, we have a minute of our meeting held on the 7th of February 2022, which I'd invite members to approve as an accurate record. I think in practice, Caroline, that's probably only you who's able to do so. Are you content? Good, thank you. And I'm happy to say that there are no current actions, so there's no current action log sitting there. On 2.2, there've been no decision. There's been no business considered between the committees, so there've been no decisions since the last meeting. And that takes us straight on to item 3, which is the financial monitoring and planning section. And I welcome both James Gray and Lynn Brown to the discussion on that this morning. James, is there anything you wish to say before passing on to Lynn?
Just that overall, I think we're on track. I think we are where we thought we would be when we did the Q3 forecast. Obviously, the thing that has the real kind of focus on it now is capital, but Lynn will take you through the report with your permission, Chair. Thanks.
Right. Thanks, James. So welcome, Lynn, over to you. As usual, you've presented a very clear report, so it's over to you to whatever you'd like to highlight.
Thank you, Chair. So, yep, the report covers the period up until the 31st of January, period 10. So, in terms of the financial position for revenue, we're seeing it slightly over forecast on a year-to-date basis, but we're not concerned about that. It's mainly due to timing. The forecast outturn position reported last month was a forecast break-even position. So, essentially, our expenditure in line with the funding available. So, that's obviously, that's what we're forecasting towards year end. Within the report, the deliverability of that forecast is amber heading towards green, just as we're getting closer to the year end. And by the period 11 report, which we've now seen sort of information around, it will be green. We are heading like that timing is shifted. So yeah, so just to give a bit of confidence around that, there's no issues there in terms of the year to date position. In terms of capital, so we're under on a year-to-date basis, but that's mainly due to delivery of electric vehicles. In terms of overall delivery, James has already mentioned there is still significant spend to happen in the final weeks of the financial year, but there are plans in place, delivery dates have been confirmed, and options are being looked at. So in terms of delivery of that forecast for capital, that remains green, so confident in delivery overall. Similarly with reform, deliverability overall green, confident for landing year-end position. Nothing specific to call out in that in terms of the year-to-date basis or the overall outturn position. So yeah, that's really the key highlights. So happy to stop there and for any comments or questions.
Right, thank you. On the very helpful slide pack, the risk analysis still shows potential for unbudgeted legal costs and liability claims. I know we've only got roughly 3 weeks to go, but hopefully there aren't any unexpected surprises coming through there.
No, nothing unexpected coming through, just that discussions are ongoing around some of the items within the budget. So just keeping it there to be prudent, but not expecting anything to adversely affect the financial position, which is why we've reflected that in the probability to make it sort of in the bottom left-hand corner, but it's just really there as it is a demand-led area and discussions are ongoing.
Fine, thank you. I'll open it up to the committee members for any queries. Caroline.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Lynn, as always, for a super clear report. So thank you for that. I suppose I'm going to, you know, we're kind of getting to the year end, and I just want to sort of pay testament to you again for landing a big budget, probably in more or less on time and budget. But the question I want to ask is around capital. It's that thorny issue, capital, and I'm just wanting to just ask a bit of a question about how we are prioritising. We've been talking before about trying to get a list of kind of ready projects to go so that by the year end we've kind of got so we're not in this position where we're underspent on capital. So I'm just wondering how that sort of prioritisation, putting projects in a line, and how you prioritise what gets spent so that we maybe have some ready to roll at the year end if things have slipped, because obviously in a big business things do slip. So I'm just wondering how that's working out and whether we're going to see a difference next year. Thank you.
So obviously this financial year we sort of implemented a new approach to capital in terms of trying to take that longer term view and looking at it, you know, overall to try and break the cycle of annual capital funding settlements.
Yeah.
You know, parts of that have worked, but obviously we are still looking at like significant spend in the last few weeks, but there has been some supply chain issues, etc., that has affected the plans. So I guess in terms of how we're approaching it to sort of prioritise how we spend that is obviously when we're setting our budgets and, you know, particularly 22-23, and then we'll go on to discuss 23-24 in the private session, we have got that over allocation, accepting that things will slip, whether it's through delays in projects, whether it's through supply chain issues. So we try to manage that by over allocating. So yeah, we accept that there's still significant spend to go, and we will look at how we can progress that moving in, accepting this was the first year obviously of that new process, and we want that to embed as we move forward. But yeah, I see James has got his hand up as well.
Yes, James.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, I agree with everything that Lynn said. The approach that we've taken is for everything that's kind of on the books to progress. That the one, I suppose, potential downside to that is around the relative prioritization of the priorities, if you know what I mean. So all the things that we're doing are priority things, but you know, at the moment it is kind of who can get on and spend the money is the ones that get to do it. It'll all get done, but the sequencing of it. And I think really the question for me, given that we've taken this approach in finance and we'll continue to do it, you know, next year with the, you know, on assuming the budget gets approved for 23-24, is to allow everything that's a priority to progress, is actually looking at the different business areas that are delivering, just to, you know, because it's the issue isn't really finance. I think that's been demonstrated over the last year, that finance isn't artificially saying, well, put a pause on that because the budget doesn't allow us to do everything. We're saying, well, progress with everything, and if we get ahead of ourselves because of the budget, we may need to slow it down. But that's
Yeah.
obviously, even though we've done that, that hasn't happened because we're still in a position where we're struggling to get the money spent. And with regards to levers to pull to get things moving, I mean, fleet is the obvious one because you can go out and buy cars. But again, we're getting to the stage now where in 12 months' time, probably the fleet will be out of an age that actually you don't need to sell cars to buy new cars because the cars you've got are already suitable. So we are running out of time with regards to that with our main lever, and I think it is having a look at how we're delivering these projects because we, as we haven't got anything up our sleeve because we've said to everybody progress, so everything is progressing. It's just that for whatever reason we're still not getting it done. Now I don't know whether that's just a timing issue and that there's a lag from when we said last year progress and the time it takes to go through governance and procurement and so on, that we might start to see 23-24 that some of the things that we'd said to progress in 22-23 start to land. And as Lynn was saying, our approach is to look multi-year, and it might just be that it's taken a little bit of time to get out of the blocks, but it is something we're going to have to monitor. And if we don't start to see a shift in 23-24, then we are going to have to look about how we do things and whether we're doing it correctly and whether we've got the right level of resource. Because capital reform is always harder than revenue from a money spending perspective, because being blunt about it, we employ 23,000 people and you don't need to do anything to spend the money. All that you need to do is recruit people that leave. Whereas with investment, it's proactive. You need to do
proactive
things.
plan.
Whereas the budget, to an extent, is reactive unless you've got specific initiatives in it, which we do have for 23-24 with the £50 million worth of savings. But it is something that we are keeping a close eye on, and there's a real awareness of it with the chief and the executive around where we are with capital. And if we're not starting to see the dial change in month 1, 2 and 3 in 23-24, then we are going to have to very quickly look at what we're doing around capital to try and get it back on track.
Do you think things like devolved budgeting, zero-based budget, any of that might help? I'm just thinking, where are the blockages? Why aren't things that say have been approved but are just not being prioritised or getting going? I'm trying to sort of work out in my head where the blockages are, because I'd have thought people that have had the projects approved would be desperate to get out the blocks and get spending, having gone to all that effort to put together a very complicated business case and get your money. I would have thought they'd be desperate to get going. So I'm trying to work out why things aren't getting going.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what we're looking at as well. I mean, the combination of factors. I mean, the supply chain has been an issue this year, so I don't know to what extent that's covering an underlying improvement because of all the other initiatives that we've done. I mean, it certainly isn't the even if there wasn't supply chain issues, we wouldn't be where we needed to be. But I don't know to what extent that is a factor. But we'll be doing analysis on that when we get to year end to understand where we've got to. And we've had conversations with Patrick around some of the things that he's looking to do around helping to progress this and improve things in the years ahead. But there are a number of factors around governance cycles and fully understanding what needs to be done by when to get things moving and being realistic about timescales. And like, if an easy example would be a building, because I think we can all understand that is around, well, if you want to build a new police station and you go and you bid for the money to get it, well, there's no point bidding money for next year for a police station, because you need to identify a site, you need to buy the land, you need to do initial planning, you need to get initial planning consent, you then need to do detailed planning, you need to get planning. But actually we might have decided to build a police station, but we're not going to see a big capital spend come through until probably
25 years,
25, 26 or something like that. So it's just so there's an element of understanding the natural cycle. But like I say, because we've allowed things to progress, even although people have maybe thought they needed the money in 22-23, if they've been doing the work to move things forward, it should mean that we're starting to see the actual need for money to come in down the line. And body worn video is another example where people are asking the question, is the money in the budget for next year? Well, yes, it is, but not very much. Not because it's not prioritized, it's because actually there's a lot of groundwork that needs to be done before you actually go out and buy the cameras, which will probably be in 2 years' time. So yeah, there are a number of different factors, but I see Patrick's got his hand up.
Yes, Patrick, would you like to come in just now, and then I'll come on to Fiona.
Thank you,
Patrick.
Chair, and sorry, just as a brief introduction, I'm Patrick, the recently appointed Head of Finance here at Police Scotland, so it's lovely to meet everyone. I mean, I've set it as one of my kind of top priorities early in the role is to look at the profile of capital, and as James says, build up that intelligence that allows us to kind of question timescales and assumptions that are in with the view of bringing that capital spend forward. And I hope as we enter the new financial year, we'll be able to provide some management information through kind of Lynn's regular finance report that shows the progress that we are trying to make. I've already committed to doing a deep dive with the main capital spenders, looking at their profile early on in the next financial year on the subject that in the private session today's budget is approved, and we'll be able to kind of generate and put some of that kind of critical friend analysis on it to our main capital spenders and try and see an improvement there. So it is one of my early priorities in post. Thank you.
Right. Thank you,
Welcome,
Patrick,
Patrick.
and apologies
Nice to
for
meet
not
you.
having welcomed you to your new role.
Not at all,
So-
Chair. Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Patrick. And I think what would be very useful is having a kind of a view on the approved projects, so the ones that have been and had board approval, and then where they are in terms of that delivery, in terms of that capital kind of prioritisation and allocation. I think that would be very useful to kind of keep a grip on the reins of what's been approved and how we are and getting delivered. Thanks.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. I had
Thanks,
that exact
Caroline.
conversation with the states yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you. Fiona, you've been waiting patiently.
Thanks, Chair. And I'd like to echo Carolyn's thanks for the clarity of the reports. You know, it was a pleasure to read all of the papers today, but it made you joining as a one-off committee member incredibly easy. So thank you for that. I suppose it's just building on the discussion we've had, and Patrick, I suspect you'll be covering this. So what's going through my mind, and James, you had raised the whole thing about how do we get things moving, and clearly there are some things that you can be, you know, rose-coloured spectacles. I'd like to get a new police station and I'll start building it tomorrow. But I'm just wondering if we've got sufficient. So there's two things. Are the governance structures that we have in place unnecessarily clumsy? And is there an appropriate level of pace when we're looking at things going through? Are we making them go through artificially too many layers? But I'm confident Patrick will pick that up. And then the other aspect is, do we have enough capacity? Do we have enough people in our estates team, project management, finance, things that I understand traditionally we would want to hold back on in terms of investing in these posts because they're not direct client facing, but they're incredibly important, because without these mechanisms in the background, we're not going to be able to deliver. So it's about pace and capacity.
Thanks, Fiona. Excellent questions. James.
Yeah, and absolutely at the nub of what the issue is here. So we had done a capital review in the last kind of 12 months or so, and they're the two issues. And you know, for Patrick, about having a look and seeing what we can do to accelerate. I mean, they for me will be the two things that we need to look at. So picking up on governance first, and I suppose this is natural in any organisation that there was an issue around control around investment decisions if you went back 5, 6, 7 years ago, and it wasn't managed particularly well. And you know, there's an example that keeps getting wheeled out around automatic number plate recognition and what happened around that. And you know, I'll not go into that, but you know, off the back of that, we developed an investment governance framework, and I think now is probably the time to review that, because that was put in place to address something where the control environment was far looser than you would expect it to be. And you know, the natural reaction is maybe you go too far the other way. So there are a lot of stage posts that you now need to get through to progress things, and you know, it doesn't necessarily reflect materiality and other factors and risk profile. So anyway, I think that's something around the investment governance framework we need to have a review of, to see, given that we've got the internal disciplines and people, you know, the right behaviours are there, actually, are we putting in too many barriers to address an issue that no longer exists around behaviour and culture? So that's something I think we need to look at. And the second thing around resource, I think, you know, after the creation of Police Scotland, the capital spending, you know, roughly halved overnight because legacy forces were able to borrow to supplement the core Scottish Government grant that was provided. So, you know, that when we came into Police Scotland, that big source of funding, borrowing, disappeared. And you know, that's why we ended up with a very small capital allocation, which at one point, I think our capital grant was, I can't remember entirely, but at £16 million, I think was at one point was maybe what we had. So I think, you know, the organisation, as it was shrinking in the first couple of years, as we were trying to make the savings from Police Scotland, if you've not got the money to invest, then, and you're trying to reduce your workforce, you know, you're likely to reduce your capacity around investment. And over the last number of years, we have had some relative success in getting our capital allocation back up into the kind of 50 odd million. As an organisation of our size, to stand still, it needs to be somewhere between 80 and 100. But at the moment, we're struggling to demonstrate we can spend 50, not because we don't need to, but because I think, to your point, I think we've squeezed the resource so much that we do have real capacity issues, and that came out in that capital review. And, you know, it's not just about finance resource and procurement resource, but I think in the business areas about having actually enough people in the estates team or the ICT team or in specialist policing equipment to actually spend the time to do what needs to be done, you know, separate to the day job. And at the moment, it does feel like a lot of what we do in around capital is done off the side of a desk, you know, in addition to what just keeping the lights on the day job. So I think those are the two primary areas of focus. But, you know, Patrick, as he says, is going to be looking at this, but I suspect that's what we'll be playing out over the coming months, and then we'll need to look to see how we address those issues.
That's really helpful. Thanks very much indeed,
Okay,
both.
yeah,
Thanks, Chair.
yes. Thanks, Fiona. James, Lynn, I would like to thank you both very much again for the clarity of your reports. As others have mentioned, they continue to be extremely clear. And for those of us who have been on the Resources Committee for a bit, we're used to the clarity of them, but it's really very good to hear other people reading them for the first time, perhaps seeing them in a very readable fashion. I think we note what has been said about the current year to date, and you have clearly a huge grip over the very considerable spend that's going through in the year, which is very welcome. I think the focus on most of the questioning has been how to sharpen up and improve the capital spend profile. And whilst I have some ideas that I've seen work very effectively in other organisations, which I'm happy to discuss with you offline, really, if that's helpful. But otherwise, we note the report and thank you very much for it. Hope the next 3 weeks don't throw up any unexpected surprises.
Thanks.
I think this takes us now to the end of the public session.